Welcome to the School of Performance podcast with Paul, Eberhardt. It's a pleasure, man. How are you?
I'm great, man. Thanks for having me on. This is exciting.
It's my pleasure, man. It's been a minute, and we just talked about it now a little bit, but just time flies, and like for me, it's such a pleasure to I've had the privilege of having so many great coaches and so many great teammates, and person personally, but now you get a chance to kind of get reacquainted and get to know person on a different level. So that's always really fun for me, beyond all the value that these conversations have for so many people. So I'm excited for that.
Hey, let's go.
Game time.
Yeah.
I'll let people know a little bit of our history. Like when I finished high school, for those who don't know, we're watching the future. I went to Cap, and Paul Ebes was the head coach at Cap, and we got to spend a couple great years together before I moved on and before Paul moved on, and that's how we kind of know each other. And yeah, I guess I'd love to hear a little bit about yourself. Like I know you personally, but a lot of people that might be listening may not be as acquainted. Tell us a little bit about who's Paul Ebes.
That was like 2008, right?
Yeah, I graduated 08, so that was like 09, 010.
Yeah. Okay. No, that was my last year at Cap, right? 2009.
Mm-hmm.
I was pretty sure I knew, but I'm getting older. Sometimes the memory as it once was. Yeah, no, man. I've been coaching basketball. I mean, since I was 16 years old. So this is my 41st year of coaching basketball. So it's crazy when you think about how long I've been doing this. So started like when I was a teenager. So I was in high school. I went to McGee High School in Vancouver, and huge sports family, huge basketball family. My dad had actually played at McGee as well, and were BC champions 1961. And
nice.
We had a blown up photo on the wall in our rec room of that team. And so I'd always sort of, had that in the back of my mind, that was something that I wanted to do. And, I was an okay player, by no means great. My brother was a great player. So I got humiliated on a daily basis in our one-on-one games. But I got injured in grade 12. I broke my foot, and right at the start of the year, so I couldn't play. Very depressed because our team was terrible, so I would have played a lot. My brother had graduated, but vice principal asked me to help him coach a grade 8 team, and one of my coaches said that he thought I was really smart about the game and that would be a good thing to do. So I did that, and fell in love with it and been coaching ever since.
That's wild. Yeah, I never knew that. So you never thought about it before? It kind of just came as an opportunity?
No, I never thought about actual coaching because, what, I'm still young at that time and, still probably think I'm a better player than I am and I want to play. But I love the game. And once sort of that was presented to me and I started doing that coaching, even though, I was only like 3 years older than the kids I was coaching, for me, that was it. I was like, okay, well, I'd kind of thought about being a teacher, but that cemented it for me. Like, hey, I want to coach. So in Canada, you want to coach, you got to teach because they don't really pay you to coach in Canada. So, I went into teaching and I coached, I continued to coach every year, even when I finished at McGee. I coached at university. I actually had a chance to become the head coach at McGee when I was like 21, senior coach. So, yeah, that was a wild opportunity, and I've coached every single year since then, at least one team.
That's wild to think about. That's such a long span.
Yeah. Some people.
That's crazy.
That crazy is a good definition. Yeah. I think crazy just about spells it out for sure.
That's amazing. And when did you make that jump towards like post-secondary, when you went from coaching high school to realizing maybe taking it like a little bit more seriously and making a real career out of it?
Well, I started my teaching career out in Richmond at a junior high school, started as part-time. And then my principal moved over to the senior high school in McNair, and they had no program there. And of course, Richmond was a powerhouse, perennial powerhouse in basketball, and so was Steveston. One BC, and so the principal wanted to get something started in McNair, so he found a way to bring me over to McNair. So I started there in like 1992, coached there for 10 years. But I think it was probably my 7th, 8th year. I really was looking for other opportunities. It sort of become my goal to become a full-time head coach, which is, I say, pretty difficult to do in Canada. And then the cab job came open, and I thought, I'm going to apply for this. Why not? It shows you, though, like how naive I was in a way, because I thought, oh yeah, this is, college, this is post-secondary, this is a big deal. Like, I can hardly wait. And after sort of I went through the interview process and I got hired, it was like, I remember getting my first contract, and I'm like, what, really? That's all you're gonna pay?
You missed the zero. Right?
Well, what? I have to drive the 15-passenger bus too? I'm like, what? It was like, maybe not quite as big time as I was hoping for, but nevertheless, I was excited to work at the next level, and see what it was like. And it was I really learned a lot. It was a great learning experience for me. It's funny, it wasn't as big a jump as I thought it would be from a technical point of view, from like a coach's point of view. But what I learned was it was a much bigger jump in how you related to and how you treated your athletes. Just very different from high school, where you control most things. And it took me a few years to sort of learn that and to maybe trust my players a bit more, because you're not dealing with brains that aren't quite complete yet. You're dealing with 19, 20, 21, 22, 23-year-olds, and you're dealing with men. And so I learned you had to handle that a bit of a different way. So that was probably the biggest adjustment I found. There was so many great coaches in the league back then. Like, it was an amazing league. For those that don't know, many of the teams that were in that league now play in the higher level, the U Sport level. They moved up, right? But teams like Fraser Valley and Thompson Rivers and they were all in the league at that time, and there was a lot of really good coaches. So I had a lot of coaches that I got to meet and know and learn from. So that's just kind of how the next level started. And I did that for 10 years at Cap, and along that way, I'd been involved in coaching a lot of provincial teams. And then, it was a weird thing. I wrote a letter to Jay Triano in 2000, or 1999 maybe, just telling him how impressed I was with what they had done at the Olympics. That team that with Steve Nash and those guys on it that went undefeated, and just to say how proud I was of what they had done. And he wrote me back and he asked me to become part of his national team staff. So that was cool. That was a dream of mine, and I was able to do that for 4 years, to be an assistant with Jay, and that was again, that's amazing experience. Yeah, that was great. I tell you, the highlight, we played China at I guess it's GM Place then. I don't know what it's called.
Yeah. Yeah. U Sports too. You caught me off guard. I'm like, what?
Yeah. So we got to play China, and this was Yao Ming's first ever game in North America.
Really?
Right? And so the community was excited. The Chinese Canadian community out here in the West Coast, and they were excited. And it was also Nash's last game. He had announced prior to that he wasn't going to play national team anymore. And so there was there was over 13,000 people there. And just walking out of the tunnel, with the other coaches, with my Canada basketball, shirt on, and just looking around and seeing that, it was just like, that was awesome. Like, that was just that was a really cool experience to be involved with. So that was a great opportunity and another real learning opportunity for me. While I was obviously still teaching and coaching at Capilano and coaching at my high school, and then I had that opportunity to do so cool. But again, it's all relative, right? So I'll tell you a quick story. So I'm so excited. I'm part of the national team staff, mostly doing West Coast stuff, right? So we actually had an exhibition series with Japan, and we were going over to Victoria to play them. Ken Shields, Canadian coaching legend, of course, he was helping with the Japanese team. So that's why we went to Victoria.
Oh, really?
So we were going to play them. Anyway, Jay tells me, hey, Ebes, he says, you got to pick up Kyle Wilson. Cal Wilson was a high school kid at the time, but grade 12, very good player. And he had to write an exam like that morning, and then he was coming over to be part of the series, right? So I had to pick him up on the ferry. So I do that. We get over to the hotel and all excited. I had done my scouting report on Japan, which was so hard to find out anything about them, right?
Right.
And so I get to the hotel and hey, Jay greets me. How you doing? That's great. And he goes, oh, and he goes, oh yeah, here's your room. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. And I go to put my bag. He goes, no, you're over there. I said, what do you mean? He goes, oh, you see that spot between the bed and the window? Yeah, that's your spot. I was like, what? And he goes, welcome to Canada basketball. I'm like, oh, okay. I guess as the rookie assistant,
That's great.
I get to sleep on the floor.
Like this ain't the NBA yet moment. Like
yeah, no, for sure. I mean, at that time too, basketball was struggling at that time, right? So anyway, but I'm happy to say we beat Japan handily, and I'm taking full credit for it on my scouting report.
Yeah, it must have been tough before, like the internet and like everything was still early on, and like you had to actually do the work. Like you got to actually send a letter to Jay Triano. It's not like Facebook or.
Yeah, it's not. I didn't even think of that. Some of the younger viewers are going,
right.
What do you mean a letter?
Right. Like
didn't
writing
DM
right. That's hilarious. That's amazing. And that's also what I take away from that. Such a great story, and it's also like such a simple action, but so well intentioned, turned into something so much bigger. Like from the simple action of just praising a great coach and a great program, turns into this whole experience. And I think that's something we can all learn from, to just like take the action. Like you never know what might stem from it. You never know what it might grow into. That's really cool.
Yeah, no, that was a wonderful experience, 100%.
That's cool. I never knew that. That's amazing. On that note, I guess I always like to kind of reminisce a little bit about favorite basketball moments, either on the court early on or throughout the years. Or I know your brother has some wild stories too that I've heard throughout the years of all these different things. But yeah, I guess whatever pops to mind is like this like top highlights from such a long career.
Yeah, it's well. I mean, I think for me the ultimate highlight for me is winning the provincial championship, winning the top level AAA championship in 2011. That was something like literally I had dreamt about since I was 15 years old. From seeing that picture of my dad's team to, I remember the first BCs I went to was at the Pacific Coliseum. I was grade 9, and our senior boys were in it. And I just remember looking around and seeing this, and I was like, "Oh my God!" And so I had become very fixated on. Well, I want to be there one day. I said, I'm not going to be there as a player, so I want to be there as a coach. And so that was sort of a lifelong dream that happened in 2011. The cool thing about it too was 2011. Well, that was of course the 60th year, right? Sorry, the 50th year of my dad winning his championship with his team.
Really?
They won in 1961. And so they were all there. They had like a box at
really
Langley Event Center, and like everyone on his team except for one person was still alive, and they were all there. So for my dad's team to get honored in their 50th anniversary win, and then for my team to win it on that same night, that was made it even more special for me. But yeah, that was an amazing moment. A very special group of players. I mean, all your teams are special in their own ways, but an unbelievably dedicated group. And I remember when they'd come to my school to RC Palmer as grade 8s, I looked at this team and I remember saying to a couple of the coaches at Palmer, like, these guys could be the ones. Like these guys have it as a possibility. This team that does very well, and as it turned out, it was. And so that was a pretty special moment. Very, very. Very special moment. And obviously I've been coaching for a while, right? So I think, sometimes we get success early, which is awesome, and maybe we don't really appreciate it or understand it. So having that success come to me a little bit later in my career or life, I think I just treasured it even that much more. So yeah, it's funny. I'd always thought I talked to Howard Samura after the game, the reporter. I had said to him that I always imagined that moment because I believe very strongly in visualization, and I had rehearsed that moment of winning the championship hundreds of times in my mind, right? And I knew that I was going to sprint out onto the court and run around and hug people and jump, and I was ready for it, right? God damn, as soon as it was over and I knew we won, like I just lost it. I just started crying. I couldn't even move. I was so overcome. It's like, damn, I had this planned out, and it was very raw for me and very exciting. So, yeah, that's a pretty cool highlight. I mean, I was very fortunate. I thought I was kind of done with post-secondary. I thought like I'd applied for lots of jobs, like full-time jobs, which we can talk about a bit later. And I'd never gotten one of the youth sport full-time jobs that I tried for. And I kind of thought I was done with college, right? I was enjoying the high school, but an opportunity came to me at Langara. Langara obviously had a great history of success, and it was like 5 minutes from where I lived, right? Back when I was with you at Cap, like we're talking major commute through traffic, right? But
making up for those long drives now.
Langara is right where I live, right? So. The AD there, he needed a new coach because he had actually been the coach for a while, Jake, but he had to take the AD position full time. So we talked, and I knew he had a good team because I'd seen them play because I still stayed in touch with Pac West, and I decided, I'm going to give this a chance. And this was an amazingly special team. I knew it from the beginning. My first meeting with them was in the classroom upstairs, and I told them all. I said, "You guys have no idea. Like, you guys are a national championship team. If you can just to be disciplined, we can win this thing." And fortunately, it was a group that bought into everything that I was preaching. And that's another thing too. You got to make your team has to buy in, or it's not going to matter how good you are. And that first year, we went like 26-2. We're number one team going into nationals, and we lost in the semifinals. Just a brutal loss. Like I can't begin to describe to you how everything went wrong, like in the last 10 seconds. But that team had a lot of resolve, and they learned a lot from what happened. And we came back the next year, and we went like 29-1, and we won the national championship in 2014. So, to win a national title, particularly so close after winning the high school title, that was another obviously very special moment with a very unique and special group of guys. So those I mean, there's so many highlights, and sometimes we get caught up in the championships and winning because that's what you're playing for, right? So those two stand out for sure. But along the way there's been literally thousands of other highlights that that I could go over, but certainly those are the two that are the most special to me for sure.
That's so cool too, how I think we've all experienced it on some level, like when you set out on a goal, whether it's because of your dad or because of your girlfriend or because of something you saw as a kid or whatever it may be, that pursuing this like huge picture that you're climbing towards. And like you said, visualization, like it's great how the mind works, where as soon as you set that out specifically and very definite what it is that you're setting out for, like you start making those steps towards it. And it's amazing that you say how in the moment like you planned it out so perfectly, and it was so different when it actually happened, because only like everything you had to go through in that process to get there, like from that point, from that first instance of setting that goal and everything that's come in between to actually achieving it. It's great, and how the mind works and visualizing and constantly being on it, and that's really cool, man. And with players too, when you said you first saw that Langara team, it's really interesting from a player standpoint of like, you have no idea, because you're coming in, you're knowing what you're about, and you're knowing what the competition you've had the pleasure of playing with. You can compare yourself to that, but a coach can look at you and say like, and now compare you to all the teams that he's coached in the past and everything, and all the teams he's coached against. And he has a far better idea of what that team and what that individual is capable of. And on a personal note, like I always love to get into these things where you kind of reminisce and stuff. Like I I can speak for myself. I felt that a lot at Cap, where you knew something about us that we didn't know about ourselves at that time. And you pushed us in a way that we would never hold ourselves to that level, because we didn't know, again, we didn't have that level of comparison. We had nothing to compare to. All we knew is what we're doing in that moment. We didn't know what we could be up to. And I know for myself, like looking back at it, that's one of the greatest gifts ever. Like a coach that has your back like that, and it's aggressive and it's intense, and it is what it is in college. Like whoever has gone through it could tell you, but the way it sets you up for success in the future is a way that there is no other way to prepare for it. You know what I mean? Like in Israel, there's a great sentence about like tough in training, easy in battle. Like you've gone through so much in practice that when I'm put forth 5,000 students, whatever, at UBC, or when I'm playing pro now in Israel and people are throwing stuff in the stands, that stuff doesn't bother me as much, because I've been through the trenches. I've been through, and that can only come from a coach that can really know what that player's potential is and can really stand up for that player. And at the time, that player might hate him. Like I know we had days where we're like screw this, I'm done with lines, man. I can't look at another line in my life. But looking back at it, it's really special knowing that made you who you are. Like that's a big part of who you are, and I'm sure a lot of players will attest to that.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I've always believed that players want to be pushed and players want discipline. I've always believed that. Sometimes it's a real difficult fight to get players there. And different coaching styles aren't for everybody, but I really believe like that. That's, what was that saying? You said tough in training. What was the?
Yeah, like tough in training, easy in battles. Like,
right. Well, I think that's a great phrase. Me, I love my quotes. I'm going to use that one now. That's great, because really that's the truth, right? Like one of the things I try to tell my players, hey, listen, yeah, maybe I'm pushing you and maybe I'm hard on you, but I'm trying to do this so that when you get to the competition or when you get to that tough moment in your life, you'll handle it fine because you've been through it already, because you know what it's like. So I think that's a great way to prepare people, is to challenge them and to push them, because all of us have no idea what we're capable of. We really don't, and for athletes in particular, right? When I talk about physical component, right? Athletes don't really know what their bodies are capable of until they really are tested and pushed. The human spirit can do amazing things. And if you never test it and you don't know it, how do you ever find out? So right. I that's always been the way I've coached. And again, like it's not for everybody, but I think pushing and challenging your athletes and trying to push them to be better. I think in the long run that'll pay off for that person within the success that you might have on your team. But after they're done with it, I think it'll help them be successful in their lives.
Right. Yeah, it's really interesting. Like I know from a player's view of it, I think there comes, like I have this conversation all the time now with athletes that I work with as a performance coach, and it's this concept of like once you realize, because it's all about perception, right? Like there's what happens in reality and there's the meaning that we give to it. And I think at least it's the successful ones and ones that have been able to come through the program and I think make an impact. I've all had, myself included, I've all had this moment of like, okay, he's doing it because he cares about me. He's not doing it to put me down. Like that's not his intention. We're in this together. Our goals are the same. And as soon as you realize that has a great analogy to life in so many different situations where this thing that's happening that may seem negative and may seem hard, this conflict or whatever that's arising at this point in my life, has a purpose. Like it's there to push me. It's there to, like you said, bring something out of me. Like pressure makes diamond, right? Like I always like to say in coaching, not basketball coaching, but in the mental coaching, like if we didn't have conflict throughout our lives, it'd be very boring, wouldn't it? If we're just successful all the time and we won everything that we ever tried and every year we win a championship, like what's the real point in that? Like it may sound nice in theory, but our whole growth as people, as human beings, comes through conflict. Like, that's where we learn, right? If we never made a mistake in our lives, how could we ever grow? If we're never put in a situation like that where there's some sort of duress, how can we really, like you said, you put it so great, like, how can we really know what we're capable of if we never put ourselves in that situation? And it's just whether the person's willing to.
Yeah, it's sometimes winning, in a sports context, sometimes winning can really hide and cover up a lot of errors and mistakes, right? You're winning, and so your players and even us as coaches, you overlook the little things sometimes. But like as a coach with experience, like I know there are times where my team is winning and doing really well, and I hope that we have a loss or that something happens, because nothing reveals true character more than when you have to go through failure, right? It's very easy to be a great person when everything's wonderful, but when you're challenged and when you have personal issues and challenges, that's, I think, when you really reveal your true character. And so there's a wonderful psychologist that I studied way back when I was in school, and he talked about, in a team dynamic, you have this thing we call it there's storming, norming, and forming. Okay, and he says all great teams, until they have the storming phase, will never become great. Like, you have to have that conflict at some point. You have to have that issue where you storm. Guys are at each other, and then after you get through that, then you form as a team and you learn more about each other and how to work together, and then it becomes a normal routine. And that's the storming, forming, and norming. And I haven't had many teams be really successful that haven't gone through some issue or some they had to deal with to see what kind of character they had. So I think you're right. I think conflict, and I think sometimes failure really is the true path to becoming a successful person.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you say, like, have you experienced like a really talented team not going through that storming phase, not going through that conflict, kind of having like or maybe going through that conflict really early on, and then not having that growth spurt, you could call it, that would end up having them be so successful?
Truthfully, not that I can really think of, and this sometimes as a coach, right, you have to manufacture it. So I know some people will say, what? But sometimes it's like, you need to manufacture that storming phase. You need to manufacture a conflict. That you need to do that sometimes. I've done that before. Things are going really smoothly, and guys are getting a little too cocky, thinking we're much better than we are, when I know we have deficiencies still. So you just kind of set something up at a practice or whatever to see how they respond to it, right? So, like an example of this is, right, maybe we're scrimmaging, right? And and I'm calling fouls, and so I will deliberately allow guys to club the shit out of each other.
Right.
I'll deliberately allow it.
I remember that.
Because I want to see how guys react to it, right? Are they going to get angry and just foul back? Or are they going to fight through it? Are they going to whine about it? So I think sometimes you need to manufacture those things just to help test your athletes and make sure that they do stay sharp.
Right.
Yeah. And even like in that great national championship team that I had, we had a loss, right? We lost to one of the schools in our league that was good, but not nowhere near our level. But it was interesting because we had been cruising along, and after that loss, we got so much more focused, and it didn't even come from me. It actually came from the players, which is always better when that happens that way. So, would we have gone on to win the national title without that loss? I don't think we probably would have. I don't know. I mean, but yeah, sometimes those little things make the difference.
Like, you need that hiccup to get remotivated. It's tough, man. It's a long season. People don't realize it. And that's like NBA and those guys, it's really wild to me. Like, even out here, when they play like in Europe and in first division or something like that, then it ends up being like a little bit of a longer season. But people don't realize how much it takes to keep up that motivation, to keep up that intensity from training camp to the end of playoffs. It's really something.
Well, it's we start in September and you finish till March, so and you're going almost every day. So yeah, it's a long season for sure.
That's awesome. It's funny because like that's actually the questions I've had. Everything about like life lessons from basketball and everything we talked and we just kind of delved into that without even realize. But to come back on track, I guess one of the things that we talked about is players being accountable. And I guess first of all, I'd love to define that because I think when we make that really precise, that's the best way to really find it. Like, how would you define that accountability for a player?
Well, I mean, I think it's just simply taking responsibility for your actions, taking
Mm-hmm.
responsibility for your play, right? You know, I find today, working, still working with high school athletes like I do, it's a little bit harder because I, I don't want to sound like the old guy, but it seems to me that parents are a little bit more what's the word? They don't want to see their kids fail or have not be successful, so they kind of
Mm-hmm.
cover for them and make excuses for them. So the kids learn this, and it's still something that I struggle with because
Mm-hmm.
you have to be a, right. It doesn't mean like if you make a mistake or screw up, it doesn't mean you're a terrible person, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when you don't understand that and you blame others for that, you know, like you miss a shot, and instead of taking accountability for that, maybe you did something. Oh, that was a bad pass. It's his fault. Do you know what I
Right.
mean? That's kind of what I see as accountability. Like to just take responsibility when you make a mistake. Don't blame others. Don't make excuses. Don't point fingers. Just go, yeah, you know what? That was on me, right? And I think that that's a really important thing for people to learn in their lives because everybody screws up, man.
Right.
Everybody makes mistakes, and nobody likes somebody who isn't able to just acknowledge it, right? And try to
Mm-hmm.
get better from it. Like, okay, I made that mistake. I'll learn from it. Um, and I think that's what I see as accountability. It's
Mm-hmm.
owning up to the things that, and it's hard, right? Because you have, you have to look inside yourself.
Yeah,
Nobody,
it takes something.
we don't like to look inside ourselves and see all of our faults, right? But
Mm-hmm.
you have to be able to do that. You have to be able to be honest about who you are, and and take responsibility for things that you've done wrong and try to improve on them. I mean, I got
Mm-hmm.
time for people like that. I have time for people who are willing to acknowledge that they made errors and they want to get better. But
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a lot of time for people who like to point fingers and blame other people.
Right.
I just think that's a terrible, terrible personality trait. And I try to make sure I teach my athletes not to be that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like your environment will sense that, whether it be on the court or in an office or at work or whatever, with your family, even whatever it
Yep.
may be. Like people feel that around you. I think it comes back to what we were saying before about how pressure makes diamonds. Like through conflict, you can really grow. And if you're a person that, when you're successful, you're taking all the credit to yourself, but as soon as something goes wrong, you go around pointing fingers. Like how can you ever grow from that mistake, right? Because if it's that person's responsibility, it's that person's growth as well. And I think when we realize that, maybe that could help players and people in general, like to do that thing that's so hard, like you said, to look within and say like, man, I fucked up, like I messed up, like that was on me. But now the good thing that comes out of it is I get to earn that growth. Like I've earned that through stripes, through my stripes, through my experiences. I've earned that growth that comes on the other side of things.
100%. Yeah, and I think that's the measure of an elite athlete in my mind, mentally, is like I'll get after my players and I'll criticize them and I'll try to correct them and make them better. But when I have a player who makes a mistake, but I look at him, right, or her, and I know that I don't have to say anything to them because they
Right.
already know. They're already their own worst critic, right? They're able
Mm-hmm.
to criticize themselves and make the correction. And I think when an athlete can get to that point in their career, they become elite because that's what you have mentally. You have to be able to do that if you're going to be an elite athlete.
Right, like nobody's gonna hold your hand. Like you learned that at some point. Like,
Yeah.
and you're saying like how with parents, I think it's the same out here in Israel, and I'm sure all over the world, where it's like our natural tendency. I don't have kids yet, but it's our natural tendency to baby our children. I would imagine, like just to help them, to protect them. But again, like how they're going to learn. And if you're constantly doing that for them as a parent or as a coach for that matter, like how will they ever learn to fend for themselves? And then the next level of that is exactly like you're saying, being that own worst critic, doing that due diligence of myself without having nobody to have to force me to do it. Then I'm really like accelerating my growth. Then everything that comes up on my path, and I always like to say this, like shit will happen, like stuff will happen along the way. Like your path is never gonna be as smooth as you might think it will be. Like stuff will come up. And when that stuff comes up, you can really pull out that growth from it, but only if you have that elite mindset, like you said, that nobody's gonna have to hold your hands to it and have you, learn from it. It's gonna be on you because we're grown, man. I think that's one of the best things maybe I got from college ball is that accelerated growth. Like I think here it's very similar, obviously like very different situations, but it's similar somewhat to the Army where people have to enlist from ages 18 to 21. So from an athletic standpoint, and that could be a whole episode on its own, it's probably the worst thing you can do as far as improving on the court. But as a man, as a person, as a woman, like getting that growth spurt emotionally and starting to look at yourself a little bit differently. And it's like, I'm not gonna, buddy up and cover up when shit hits the fan. Like I'm a step right into it and take that growth and take that lesson. And like you said, that elite mindset, even beyond the court, I think in business and in everything, that's a huge difference. Like for people to really maybe look at themselves and be like, could I be a little bit better in that? Could I do that maybe a little bit more? That's really interesting.
Well, it's simple. A mistake or a failure is an opportunity to grow. Right. And that's what you have to look at, right? Otherwise, you'll fail and make mistakes over and over again, right? It's not that, my Palmer team that won it all in 2011, what I didn't tell you is in 2010, we were playing double A, right? There was just 3 tiers of single, double, triple. We were a small school. So I had the whole team was all grade 11. So we played double A. Well, we were the number 1 team. We were undefeated. We went into the final against a Britannia team that we had soundly beaten before, and they thrashed us in the final, and we didn't win. We should have won that provincial title. We didn't win it. But I know that if we don't go through that, I don't think we win the AAA title. Right? Because in that final game against Vancouver College, by the way, one of my biggest rivalries.
I remember that too, man. We could have a whole podcast on BC.
With Coach Phil Disbrow coaching them, another rivalry that I had. We were down 17 in the first quarter. We were down 17. And, I used both my timeouts, plus we had like a media timeout. The third timeout was a blur. I can't even remember what it was. I think there was probably a lot of F-bombs in that third timeout.
Things flying.
But the funny thing was like I looked in their eyes and I wasn't that worried anymore because I've been through this. And DJ, the kid who was the MVP, he just said to me, he said, "Ebes, we got this. Give us a shot. We'll get it." And sure enough, we made the largest comeback in finals history.
That's huge.
The game, but I don't think that would have happened if we hadn't had experience what we had the year before.
Right. Developing that thicker skin to go through that adversity.
Because the first time that we were in a final, we went through it, we kind of fell apart and we didn't recover. Second time. So, those are valuable experiences if you take the opportunity to learn from it.
For sure. And as tough as it may have been, like I'm sure those kids were heartbroken. Like after that AA championship, I'm sure if you ask, well, whoever of them have taken it on and have done exactly what we're talking about here now, if you ask them today, like how did that affect their lives? I'm sure now that things come up, like we talked before, it doesn't sting maybe just as much because you've gone through stuff like that. And I know it's sports, and I know it's not like people seem to like there's army out here, and we were talking a little bit earlier. I was telling you about the whole conflict out here, and there's huge things, off the court, but that's one of the great, amazing things about sport, that these analogies, these life lessons, you can't really get anywhere else. Like there's really only a handful of situations where you can feel that type of emotion and that type of heartbreak or whatever it may be. And there's 2 ways you can go from it. You can let it break you down, or you can grow from it and do exactly what we were just talking about now, which is really, really interesting. Yeah.
For sure, man.
I know. I know one of the subjects that we really want to delve into is the whole concept of making that decision. I'm sure it's way different now than when I graduated high school, like with so many options and social media and all these things. I guess something that's really interesting to me, and I think it holds great value for a lot of players is like what's really important to base that decision. Like where do maybe some players misread the situation where they give value to maybe the wrong things, where their decision is based upon, I think we make this mistake a lot in life where we're kind of dealing with above surface stuff or materialistic things or whatever it may be, where we're not really thinking ahead and saying, where could this, if I look at it 5, 10 years from now, it might not be like the glorious decision, or like you said, it took you so long to win that championship, but it was so sweet at the end because everything that has gone into it and that patience and that work and never giving up on it. I can attest about Cap that it was one of the best decisions I've made, where I had offers to whatever bigger schools or maybe schools in the States or new schools and whatever it may be. Going to that path was amazing for me personally. So how could players kind of look at that decision in a more, I guess, educated, more well-rounded way, do you think?
Well, it's interesting, right? Obviously talking from a basketball perspective out here in British Columbia, right? Just, that's what I know the best. But I know what happens everywhere is sometimes, well, let's be honest, when you're 15, 16, 17, the world kind of revolves around you. That's part of being a teenager. And you think you know more than you do. And sometimes sort of that outside commendation that you get, that validation you get, is more important than it should be. Kids don't always understand that yet. And what I'm seeing happen out here is I believe truthfully that kids are getting a lot of bad advice from people who have agendas. I'm just going to flat out tell you, there are clubs operating out here who, in order to draw kids in, are misleading these kids about what their future is in basketball, and their parents. Like, so many kids I talk to, like, oh yeah, I'm going to go NCAA Division I. And I'm like, hey, it's good to have high goals. Like, you should always have high goals, and you should always attest, right? Like, I don't want to be the guy that shatters those, but at the same time, you have to be realistic. So even just from a numbers point of view, the number of kids from our area of the world here in BC that are able to play Division I on the men's side, we're lucky if we have one kid a year or two that can do that success. Like, that's just a fact, right?
Right.
Yeah, you have 50 to 100 kids who think it's going to be them, and you have people telling them this in order to get dollars out of them for their personal training in their clubs. And I just think I think it's reprehensible. I think it's disgusting. And I think these kids need to have a better education about, what the basketball world is really like. And one of the reasons I've always loved to do provincial teams, and I've worked with provincial teams for a long time, is because you get an opportunity to take that group and go play down at some of the toughest tournaments in the state. And they, when you talk to them, you go, take a look. Like, you're a 5'11", super quick, talented guard. But look, that other team has 5 guys like you, but they're 6'4", right? Like, it's just, you just have to help kids understand that it's okay to dream big and push for the top, but have a backup plan. Because what I see happen a lot is kids will go somewhere. It's a terrible choice for them. They'll never play. They get turned off to basketball and they're done, right? As opposed to, hey, you know what? Maybe going to Langara for a year or two might have helped me develop, and I could have been done a lot better. Or maybe going to UBC was a better choice than trying to go to this Division I school. And the other thing too that I don't think kids and their parents understand is, especially when you go down to the States, Division I, even Division II, or even junior college to a certain extent, depending on where you go, it's a business.
Right.
That coach is dependent upon his team winning to feed his family. Yeah. So they bring you in, and maybe they think you're going to be a great player for them, but it doesn't work out. Man, you're done. They don't give a shit.
They'll spit you out. It's really similar to the pro system, yeah. Where if you're not giving If you're not bring the goods, man, they'll spit you out. They don't care.
Yeah. And so I just think that type of, we need to, as coaches, we need to do a better job of educating our kids about this, and finding places that make sense for them to continue to play, because there's lots of places to play. There's places everywhere, but you need to find the right fit. You need to find the right academic fit too. All those things have to come into consideration, right? Like, when you look at the most successful basketball player, BC's ever had, of course, is Steve Nash, right? 2-time MVP. Well, where did he go to school? Well, he didn't have a lot of options. He wasn't really recruited, but he went to a small mid-major school, Santa Clara, and he got a couple of lucky breaks there in terms of getting to play early with some injuries, and he was able to make the most of it, right? And he developed from there. He gets drafted, kind of starts slow in the NBA, but his work ethic is insane, right? That's obviously insane. But if he goes to, like North Carolina, or he goes to like one of those big schools like that, does he end up doing what he did? I don't know. I mean, he, like I said, his work ethic is insane. It's possible, but he went to a place that was a really good fit for his talent, and he had the opportunity to play and be part of it. And so many guys make the wrong decision, and you never hear from them again.
Right. I think there's no, like, Steve is a great example, and you could look across the board. I love saying this to players I get the chance to work with. Like, there's no substitute for minutes. There's no substitute for court time. And I think a lot of times it'd be interesting to open up with you, like, what do you think motivates that decision? Because you see it out here, for example, like here there's divisions, right? The first division, second division, third division, fourth division. For a high school kid to even make, like, I guess you'd call it like men's level, is an achievement already. Even fourth division is an achievement. And then the money kind of varies between the divisions. But sometimes you see a lot of kids go to second division, first division right away, thinking like getting the glory, getting the name. And then they don't get minutes. They realize that, like you said, it's a business. It's an all-out business, especially second division. We're not going to get too much into the details, but it's like 2 American guys that take on most of the statistics of the team and get most of the money too. And the Israeli guys kind of sit back. And I think it's similar to the concept of Division One, like going to the States, getting all the whatever, all the lights and all the name brands and all that, where a player would be much better off playing third division, fourth division, developing. Like I got to see a guy yesterday. I played in a summer run with him where I didn't see him since high school. Like my first team in Israel, he was in high school, and he's taken that route. He's been playing third division like 5-6 years now, developing his game, and now they won a championship. They moved up a division. He might stay with that team. He might go to a new team, but now he's in such a way better position than a player that maybe was in high school back in the day and has jumped up to first division right away and has been riding the bench for 5 years.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's interesting it'd be interesting to see how you look at it. Like, what do you think is driving that? Is it just like the glamour and the name brand and the ego?
I think, for the most part, yeah. That's what it is. It's perceived as being, the ultimate thing to have, which, is great. But if you don't have the skill level necessary to do it, why would you waste your time? But yeah, I think it's an ego thing. I think it's hey, I want look everybody what I've done. Now, like you said, you want kids to have high goals and push themselves. That's what you want. But I think my job as a coach is to help steer them. And like, okay, hey, you want to play Division One? Awesome. Okay, let's look at that. Let's make some calls to some of the schools. Let's see what happens. But let's also not forget about UBC, or let's not forget about Fraser Valley or Cap, or you have to be realistic. And here's the other thing that blows my mind. Like, it blows my mind because the number of emails I get from kids is phenomenal. Like, it's crazy. And sometimes when I'm recruiting a kid and I'll talk to them, I'll ask them, like, well, what do you know about? First of all, I say, well, what do you know about me? Like, well, what am I all about? And the number of kids that don't have a slightest clue, I just my mind, like, why wouldn't you do your research? But here's the other thing. So you're a really talented, say, 6'3" guard coming out of high school. Several schools are interested in you. Wouldn't you go, especially now that we have this thing called the interweb. Like when you go
Right.
and find out who's
So easy
returning
now.
who's returning on that team, what positions are, like, wouldn't you do that? Wouldn't you try to find that out? Like, take a look at oh my God, wait a minute. He's bringing back 11 guys. Like,
Right.
where am I doing that? Oh, hang on, that school's only bringing back 3 guys. Like you have to do some work. So you have to research about schools you want to look at. You have to be realistic, right? Like, dream high, but be realistic, and just, make a good choice, and make that choice with people that you trust and will help you make the right choice.
Right.
There are
Like
people
doing that work, man.
the way it is who are motivated by things other than that, and they give you bad advice.
Right. Yeah, it's wild to think about. Yeah. Like, and yeah, just doing the work. I guess it comes back to that point of, like, nobody's going to hold your hand. Like, you got to hold yourself accountable. You got to do the behind the scenes, because you're going to end up living with the results. Like, how many players are coming back? Is there a star player on my position? Is there 50-year guys? Maybe like second year I'll get more playing time. Like, really thinking ahead, not just thinking like talent is going to hold me through. I think, another lesson, that was more of a personal thing, like less to do with the environment. I'm sure the environment had a huge part, like you and Ufford and Matthias and all these guys, and JY and all these guys I've had the pleasure of playing with and playing under this concept of work. Like, I think a lot of guys come in being purely talented, and they'll have to realize at some level, if they want to make that jump, that it's not going to hold you through. Like, you got to be willing to put in that work. You may be, and it's like this great story, if you ever heard it, where Chris Bosh says when he joined the Miami Heat, he's like, I thought I was working, but then I saw these guys, and I kind of realized like what real work was, and you really saw a jump in his game. Like, it was a way different player than what he was in Toronto. And that realization that talent isn't going to hold you through. Like, you might be talented in high school, you might even be talented in college, but if you really want to make that jump, and who knows, maybe you've done it, pretty successfully in high school and college, you got to put in that work, and it goes beyond the court too, like with school, with recruiting, with finding the right school. If like your success is going to be a product of your work ethic. Like, I think kids that hold, right?
So talent will take you only so far. And if you're like a super ridiculous athlete, you'll go a long ways with your talent. You will. But there will come a time at some point where it won't be enough, because you're going to run into other guys who have that same level, but work way harder than you, put in way more effort than you, study the game.
Right.
And that's when you see if that super talented athlete doesn't learn that at that point, then they crash and burn. It'll always catch up to you. I really believe that.
Just a matter of time.
Yeah, unless you're just like an insane physical specimen, like a Shaq or something like that, it's going to catch up to you at some time.
Right. There's another great quote. I know now you like these quotes. There's another one I always like to go by that says, I think I heard Kevin Durant use it, but I'm sure someone else came up with it. Hard work beats talent when talent fails to work hard. Like, talent will only take you so far. Yeah. And the earlier you have that realization with yourself, where you got to put the work in. And I always loved that Larry Bird story where he would say, whenever I was working out, I was always thinking of the guy on the other side of the world that was shooting 100 shots more than me, and working against him rather than whoever was locally, whoever was challenging me locally.
Yeah, that's a wonderful visual too. Like, here's this guy in Indiana in the middle of the winter shooting hundreds of shots that are frozen blue, and I got to go inside. Oh, but wait a minute, someone over there's get another 100 shots up, so I'm going to get another 100 shots up.
Right.
Yeah, you have to have a really insane kind of drive, and I think that can take you further. Actually, everyone's going to reach their point at some point, but if you have that same work ethic, you can accomplish more than what your skill set should have allowed you to because of that.
Right. You'll like beat out your potential, whatever it was that you might aspire to. You can. So yeah, I guess like if we were to sum it up, I think most interesting to me, but I think it's relevant to all athletes that are looking to play at that level. But those guys that do have the opportunity maybe to play Division I and are super talented and all that, what would be like your summed up advice to them, like when they're at that stage of like not listening to maybe those factors, those people that are pushing them to make that decision? Like, what should they be basing it on?
Well, I mean, again, you have to do your research and your work. You got to know the history of the program. You got to know how the coaches coach, what their coaching style is. You got to look at the roster and see who's coming back, who's there. I mean, if you're humble and you say to yourself, I'm a freshman, I'm going in my first year, and I'm a point guard, and oh my God, this team here, they got a fourth year point guard who's unbelievable. Like, hey, you know what? I'm going to go there because he's in his fourth year, but I'm probably not going to play at all my first year. But I'm going to get to practice against this dude every day. I'm going to get this guy's going to make me better. So when he's done, I might have a chance to step in and play too, right? Like, you have to look at that factor too, right?
Right.
Like, it might not happen for you right away. But hey, if you get the opportunity to practice against this great player, he's going to make you better, and then you'll get your opportunity to never play, right?
Yeah, that's a great point. Like, are you willing to put yourself in that duress? Are you willing to put yourself, like, you deciding to go there and knowing that's what's going to happen, but also knowing that you're going to grow from it? Like, you're not going to break, when you've come into to take on. No, that's really important, man. I really love these talks.
Sorry, funny, didn't interrupt you, but it's funny because I was just thinking, when I recruit kids, a lot of coaches will the kid will say, oh, I see, you've got, your two big guys are back, do you think I'll get to play much? Right? Kids might ask that question. And a lot of coaches will slide around that or will not maybe be 100% truthful.
Right.
I said, well, no. I said, that guy's an all-Canadian and he's in his fifth year and that guy's 20. I said, but you know what? I said, you're good. And those guys are going to beat the shit out of you every day in practice. You're going to have to battle them. And guess what? You're going to become a better player. So, hey, this year you might not get in a lot, but if you put yourself through that, you're going to be way better and you're going to get an opportunity at another point. And I think that's something kids have, there's only so many minutes, right? And you have to be realistic and say, okay, well, maybe my minutes aren't there right away, but it's a good situation for me down the road. I'm going to be there. So, sorry, that was just another thing.
No, for sure. That's so true. And I think that has to hold value to kids coming out of high school. Like, the kids got to start looking at that. Like, who do I get to practice with? Like, not just games, man, because games are going to define your career. Honestly, like making it to the next level. I mean, obviously, when you get to whatever level it is that you're trying to reach, games are going to define you. But to get to that, it's going to be all that behind the scenes, right? Like anything. And if you have a great player, like what jumps up for me is me at Fraser Valley. Like, I finally made that jump. I finally, after like 4 or 5 years, managed to play CIS or youth sports that it is now. And looking back at it, guys I got the privilege to play with in practice, like guys, some guys I knew from Basketball BC, some guys I've never, like Kyle Graywall was an all-Canadian. Sam Freeman, who I knew from Basketball BC, but has made a tremendous jump in university. And I get to play like Jordan Blackman, like young guys, American guys, all these guys. And guys that are honestly way talented than me. But like you said before, like, I think without realizing it, I guess it kind of became a habit as I was growing as a player, that I took that mentality that you just mentioned. Like, I want those guys in practice. I don't know about the game. Like, that's out of my control. I'm going to do what I can. And I ended up being a starting center. It was pretty funny at 6'5", guarding like 6'9" guys, just because I guess I could hold my own. But I took that on, like, without even realizing, knowing that at practice I'm going to get better. And I may not get minutes at U of V, but if my goal was to always come back to Israel and then play, if that's my goal, then that's going to work me towards that. It may not be fun getting my ass kicked every day, and it may hurt my pride a little bit, but if I'm humble, like you said, and I'm willing to take that on, there's a lot to be gained from that mentality. There's a lot to be gained from that perspective. Oh, that's huge, man. That's awesome. Yeah, we're kind of like towards the end. We're just at about an hour. There's always 2 questions I love to end up on.
Ask whatever you want, brother.
The first one that I really love is, how do you define success? Either success or performance, I guess. What would be your definition? How does it look in your eyes?
Well, I mean, it probably will sound a bit corny, right? But I think you define success sort of in my sport, in coaching. The success is defined by winning, but I I have a kind of a different definition of winning because, and I tell my players this, I say, you can win, right, without really achieving anything at all, and you can lose and still achieve. And what I
Right.
mean by that is sometimes the scoreboard is deceptive, right? We all know we've been in games where you win by 20, but you didn't give any effort. You just were way better than that team. You didn't play hard. You didn't play as a team. You won the game on the scoreboard, but you perform so below your abilities.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have those moments where you play way beyond your abilities. I mean, I can think of so many times where my teams have done that and almost pulled off a big upset. Sometimes you do pull off the upset, but
Mm-hmm.
at the end of that game, you can look at your team and you can say, "Hey, I'm proud of you because you gave it everything you had. You worked your asses off. You overachieved. Unfortunately, that team maybe just had a bit more talent than you. So, I mean, that's still successful, right? And sometimes we forget that. The greatest Wes Unseld, who's a hero of mine when I was a kid, undersized center for the Washington Bullets, all-time top 75 NBA player. He said the greatest feeling in sport is lying drenched in sweat at the end of the game on the floor, exhausted after a win. He said the second greatest feeling in sport is lying drenched in sweat, exhausted after a loss. Right? So, I think that's an important thing that we always have to remember that, that's really what it's about, right? If you've done everything you possibly can and given every bit of energy and effort that you could, that's success, right?
Right. No, that's awesome. That gave me goosebumps, man. I'm gonna use that story too. That's really cool, yeah. Because and it's the only thing that's in your control, like the result and all that. It may not be in your control a lot of times, right? The refs and the coaches
Oh
and
my
whatever
God,
maybe.
people have no idea, like winning a championship is so friggin' hard at any level because everything has to go right.
Right.
You can't control it. Like that semifinal game that we lost in 2013 at the Nationals, my Langara team. I mean, tons of stuff happened at the end of the game, but one thing that happened was we were up 2, and they shot a 3. Or no, sorry, we were up 3, and they shot a 3, and it was one of their worst shooters. Like it was the guy we wanted to shoot. We have the perfect rebounding triangle. Like we're getting this board, and we're going to the national finals. The game is over. The ball wedges between the rim. How many times do you see that happen in this season? Like how many times? Like once, maybe?
That's amazing.
They had to jump all possession.
Wow.
So that's what I mean. Like everything to go right. And so, like, again, even though we weren't successful that year, we ended up getting the bronze medal. That was an unbelievably successful year. And a really bad break sort of stopped us from, achieving our goals. So, yeah, it's so many things have to go right. It's crazy.
So many of those things, yeah, man. It's wild. That's cool. Yeah, and I guess the last one that I would like to end up on is if you could go back to your early coaching days, like when you first really got started. That's wild. I didn't know you were so young, like you're really just a teenager. But I guess at those early stages, and you could kind of pull young Ebes aside and maybe whisper a little something in his ear that would help him throughout his career and push him towards those goals. What would you tell him?
Well, that first year I was coaching the grade 8 team at McGee. We won the city championship, right?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but I don't know if that was good for me.
Right, yeah.
17, won the championship. This coaching thing is easy, man. I'm awesome.
Yeah, taste of victory right away.
I know everything, right? I look back now and I didn't know shit. Are you kidding me? Like,
right.
So, I don't know. I mean, I think one of the things that sometimes I think as a coach that I get too focused on, honestly, is I get, as you know, I'm sure you know what I'm going to say, I get a little too focused on the referees at times, right? And well, I think there's some positives to that. I mean, I want my players to know I got their back, right? And I want to stand up for my players, and but there's also some negatives to that. And as a young coach, if I could go back and say, hey, focus a little more on the game and on the players. And, yeah, protect your players, but leave the refs alone a little bit more. I think that's probably what I want myself to do. I'd like to think I've improved in that area. in 40 years. I think I have, but I'm sure there's some
I watch some game tape. Even.
I'm sure there's some referees out there that would tell me that I probably haven't. So, but yeah, I mean, that'd be one little thing I think I could probably tell my younger self to do better with.
That's cool. I'm gonna watch some game tape, Eves, and I'm gonna get back to you on that. I'll let you know if there's an improvement from the 2009 season.
Well, I'd like to say that I didn't get thrown out of a game this year, but I actually did.
There you go.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I guess I'm still that same guy.
Same guy, same goals. That's amazing, man. No, it's been a pleasure. I really enjoyed it. I'm glad we got together. When I come out there, we'll have to get together in person. And I really want to acknowledge you. What's that?
It's been cool catching up with you, and
for sure.
I'm really proud of what you've done. Like, congratulations. It's very cool to see your journey, and to I didn't know a lot about. I mean, I knew you were over there, but I didn't know a lot about what you're doing. And yeah, I'm really proud of you, man. Well done.
I appreciate it, man. I appreciate it a lot. Yeah, and I really want to acknowledge you. Like, I can attest on a personal level, like we've talked throughout this hour, but just the impact you have on people, man, and whether it be students or players or people that get to work with you, it's not a given. You know what I mean? To have people like you and just keep doing what you're doing, man. And for guys that are playing and players, I'd love for as many people to listen to this to really realize that point, really realize that it may be hard, like it may be hard in the trenches, like in practice and in college and whatever, but it's so key. And it's just your coach having your back. Like, as soon as you realize that, everything becomes so much easier, and it's such a value to life. Like ball is one thing and it's cool, and you may get the opportunity to do it professionally and get a little bit of money and fame or whatever it may be, but life goes on, and those lessons will follow you wherever you go. And I'm super grateful. I get goosebumps thinking about it. I really go back a lot to like my college days when I'm out here, like just thinking about just being in the trenches, like thinking about those practices and thinking about those life lessons. And I really want to, thank you for that. I'm grateful for that, and I acknowledge you for continuing to do that, man.
Yeah, we'll keep doing it as long as my body lets me. I'll keep
right.
Keep doing it.
You got to cut down on the bear rolls at the camps. I'm not sure if those are still happening.
Well, hey, let me just tell you, I'm at peak weight right now, so that could be dangerous.
Gotta sign a thing, like a permit when you come to summer camps now.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's great, Eve. It's been a pleasure, man, and we'll stay in touch. And when I come out, we'll have to get together.
All right. Thanks so much.
I appreciate you, man. Have a good one.
You too.